Hello, today we're sitting here with Mr. Denny Craycraft, Belding, Michigan, Vietnam veteran who has quite a story to tell from there. And we're sitting in a beautiful park here next to the Flat River in Belding, right near the VFW and the railroad depot. And Denny's got quite a story to tell too after he tells of his military service of these beautiful memorials he's got. First of all, my name is Steve Hammond. I'll be the interviewer. And Denny, let's just jump right in and just say, when were you born and where were you born?
Steve, I was born in 1946 at Newberry, Michigan in the UP, and moved to Belding when I was about 2 years old and been raised in Belding ever since then.
Tell me about your parents.
Mom and Dad, I was adopted when I was, well, my stepfather is the only father that I've known, but anyway, the greatest people that there are, they're both gone now, but taught me all my values to be who I am today, I guess, and contribute everything of the way I act to them.
Oh. Was your step-parents in service at all?
My father was a World War II veteran, my stepfather. Actually, kind of uniquely, I met my real biological father for the first time in my life on the way to Vietnam. Oh,
wow. Would you like to tell us that now, or do you want to wait till you get into your service?
I can do that. Growing up I'd like to go into a little bit about Belding if I
Sure, go ahead, yeah. First of all, I'm sorry, before you go,
okay.
Any brothers or sisters? I
have no brothers or sisters.
Okay.
Belding raised me along with my parents, and a lot of things that I didn't know about until after I got out of the service about this town and the character of this town. The people in town, I worked with a lot of them. They hired me from pumping gas to setting bowling pins in the bowling alley, and just a great bunch of people. That was before the city was tore down and the mall was put up. But it was just a great little town to grow up in and learn how to be a good American. And I didn't realize these people that I worked with all my life going up through Belding until after I got out of the service and I got into this project of erecting this World War II wall that sits behind us, or in front of us here, not behind us, and realized that all those guys that I grew up around, their names are on that wall when they served in World War II. And when I graduated in 1966 at Belding High School in June and entered the service in September, we kind of knew at that point in time that our destiny was to go to Vietnam, because that's where everybody was going. There was no lotto back then. It was all about going in. I joined the Air Force after working at Kelvinator in Grand Rapids for a while. My chief steward lived next door to an Air Force recruiter, and when I got my paperwork to go into the Army, be drafted in the Army, he pulled some strings, and within 2 days I was in the Air Force. So, and went down to San Antonio, Texas for my basic training, and after I got out of basic training, I was assigned to Dover, Delaware as a ground traffic controller.
Okay. Before we go into Dover, Delaware, tell me about your training at San Antonio.
It was an experience, pretty much what most military people go through. Of course, maybe wasn't as rigorous as the Marines, but we had survival training, we had physical fitness training, we had weapons training, and there was a lot of training on how to detect booby traps and stuff like that we were going to be faced with in Vietnam, and basically the art of survival and doing what you have to do in the military.
Did they stress a lot of, I don't know how to say this, we're at war type thing, no fooling around type stuff in the training?
We had some trainers down there that had already served time in Vietnam, which was really beneficial to us. They told us stories, and we were told to, when you get assigned to your unit in Vietnam, to make sure you hook up with somebody that's been over there for a while that can give you the ins and outs, and listen to them very well for your survival.
Oh. Okay, now you went straight to Dover, Delaware, that air base?
That's correct.
Did you, when I was in the Air Guard, did you go to a tech school or?
No, I went right out of basic training. They did have tech school if you were desiring to go into a certain field. Not knowing, having to go into the Air Force that quick, I really didn't have any set avenues to go down in the Air Force. So I just more or less took things as they came along, and I didn't go to tech school. Went right to what they call on-the-job training in Dover, Delaware, and I was lucky enough to get into ground traffic control, which I enjoyed very much.
Sure. Explain that. Your training for ground traffic.
Ground
explain your
control,
job.
we had to configure the loads on the plane. We had a big office with, back in those days they had computer cards. You had to learn how to read the computer cards for the loads of cargo, and we had a big wall, probably 20 foot long, 10 foot high, of all the missions that were leaving Dover, Delaware that day all over the world. And we had to configure the load by computer and manifest, and then we would have Air Force people come in and pull the load and load the plane.
While you were going through your training in San Antonio and then of course at Dover, Delaware, what time of year was this?
Well, I went in September in at San Antonio. It was hot down in San Antonio in September. After getting out from there, it was almost November when we got into Dover, Delaware. Dover, Delaware was a great state. I love that state. We had cold weather, but nothing like Michigan.
Right.
You get an inch of snow on the ground there, and they want to shut the state down. You know, but it was a very nice base and community to get acclimated into the military.
Wow. So how long were you there?
I was there just about a year, and my unit got activated to go to Vietnam, and I was told I did not have to go to Vietnam, being an only child, but I was going to go with my unit. I did not want to stay back, so I went over with my unit.
So in other words, you volunteered?
I volunteered.
Do you have any regrets?
Not a bit. Not a bit. It could have went the other way for me many times, but with the experience and coming out of it, with I guess your attitude is what you got to go in with and come out with. It taught me a lot. You never will ever come back the same person when you went over to Vietnam, and you'll never be that same person again when you come back.
Sure.
It teaches you a lot about life, and it made me a better American and appreciate everything around me on a daily basis.
Okay. So then when you were activated to go to Vietnam, tell us about going there and getting there.
Well, we flew into Vietnam on a commercial flight, and flying into Nhut Air Base in Saigon is like flying into Gerald Ford airport, you'd never thought you were in Vietnam.
Really?
Wow. In fact, the time that I was there, I was amazed. Thank God I had a chance to get my feet on the ground and get my wits about me on how to act and what to do and what not to do. But it was, I could hardly believe that I was in Vietnam when I was at Dover, or I mean at Travis, or not Travis, Tan Son Nhut. When we landed, we were all shuttled into this big hangar, and I don't, to this day, don't understand how they assign people to different jobs. Even though I was a ground traffic controller in Dover, I ended up being a munitions specialist and working in an ammo dump at Tan Son Nhut Air Base. And it was one of those things that this is going to be your job, this is going to be your job, this is going to be your job. So your MOS doesn't mean anything in the States when you got over to Vietnam.
Typical service, basically.
Typical service, right.
Yeah. They, was there any training at all, or they just shoved you like you said in that job?
The training, yeah, I had to go through a lot of training again. Being in the ammo dump, you had certain ammunition you couldn't put beside each other, and you had to learn all that. That was like on the job training, you had to be very well organized, because I mean, planes may be coming in at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever, and they may be dropping off ammunition or picking up ammunition to go, and you had to make doggone sure your manifests were right, your revetments were right. There was quite a lot to grasp for not having any experience or training on that prior to that. And the people that were there, I rotated, or one of the guys that worked there, we had 4 guys per shift, so we had 2 shifts. We worked 12-hour shifts, and 4 guys had to work per shift in the ammo dump. So when we go in the morning, we'd get briefed or debriefed, or we'd have to debrief when we went out. We had to go around the perimeter of the base to get to the ammo dump, and we had 3 checkpoints, and every morning, 6 in the morning to 6 in the evening I worked. They gave us a code whenever we got stopped, like coffee, 2 lumps of sugar, black or cream, or whatever, in order to get past that checkpoint to get to the ammo dump. That was pretty risky at times, running around the perimeter, getting to and fro, and sometimes the airplanes couldn't get over to the taxi over to our ammo dump, and we'd have to go over on the other side of the base and pick up munitions, tons of munition, and bring back over to the ammo dump. And you could spit off the perimeter of the trail going around. So it would have been, and it happened several times where we were getting sniped at going around the perimeter with either with or without ammunition.
Wow.
We had to go, 2 guys had to stay in the ammo dump at lunchtime. 2 guys would go over on the other side of the base and for lunch, come back, and then the other 2 guys would go. So, I mean, it was a constant 24/7 people being in the ammo dump.
And I'm sorry, I don't know if you said this or not, but whereabouts in Vietnam was this at?
That was Tan Son Nhut Air Base, just outside of Saigon.
Just outside of Saigon, okay, thank you. All right, so mention to me the possible areas that were very hot, that you were close to, that are listed in the history books, like the Tet Offensive, Khe Sanh.
Right, I was on Tan Son Nhut Air Base during the Tet Offensive in the ammo dump. Not a good place to be.
Could you explain that a little bit?
We were getting shelled, and we had hundreds of NVA, North Vietnamese, and Gooks, what we call Gooks.
Right.
They weren't the NVA from the north, but they were the enemy from the south that were invested into the south. we had them on base, so we were collecting rockets and mortars from everywhere, and of course they knew that where the ammo dump was at, and of course they wanted to blow the ammo dump. So it was very, and we had the enemy within the perimeter, and we just had to make sure that we weren't, when we were catching fire and returning fire, that we weren't shooting our own people, because it was chaotic.
That happened a lot, didn't it?
It happened a lot, right.
Yes.
Especially when they were within your perimeter. And it's real easy to do your duties shooting outside the perimeter when they're trying to get into your perimeter. But during the Tet Offensive, we have a lot of Vietnamese working on the base, and a lot of those that were working on the base were already on the base and had weapons hid on the base when Tet Offensive came.
All right, you mentioned the NVA, which is a North Vietnamese Army, was it?
Right.
And you mentioned Gooks. You said they were South Vietnamese, or were they
well,
the same as?
They were, how do I want to say this? They weren't the military-trained NVAs that were coming down from the south on the Ho Chi Minh Trail and all that, but they were the, I guess you'd call the radicals in the south that were fighting for the north, the black pajamas. We have several names for them.
Right.
Dinks, Gooks, and it's kind of ironic because if you look at the word Gook, the meaning of Gook is foreigner. We're the foreigners.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of people through history, I know I was just young during Vietnam, they consider that a racial term.
Yeah.
But the real Gooks were us.
Yeah. We didn't have to, back then, we didn't have to be politically correct.
Exactly, yeah. We understand.
Yeah.
So it's just very interesting to note that wasn't, we all considered it over here in the States, all Vietnamese as that term, yeah.
Right.
So, okay, the Tet Offensive, Khe Sanh.
Khe Sanh was a very hot spot at the point, and what that actually turned out to be was a diversion. Khe Sanh was being hit real hard up there, and they had a heavy force trying to overtake Khe Sanh. We had an airstrip there. The Marines owned that base on top of the hill, and it was very detrimental for the enemy to have that base. Well, they poured so many people in there, our leaders, our generals and that, thought that they sent a lot of our people up north to fight that battle. And while that was going on, they were hitting Hue, Tan Son Nhut, Cam Ranh Bay, Da Nang. They were trying to make a big offensive throughout the south, and like I said, it was, Khe Sanh was actually a diversion and a very costly conflict within Vietnam, but we held our own, and the Marines did just exactly what they do.
So you were pretty much, are you on the same base as like the Army and the Marines too?
Right. When I was when I was in Tan Son Nhut, it was strictly Air Force, but we had regiments of Army and Marines on that base. But when I went up north on this mobility team, we'd fly in for a week or two at a time wherever there was a big movement going on in South Vietnam, and they had a dirt strip, Seabees would open up a strip, and then we'd spend a week or 2 weeks, bring our equipment in, our Jeeps with the radios, bringing the planes in, and we'd have to clear the strip as soon as they came in, got the stuff unloaded so they could take off. A lot of times they never even landed. They just came in and skimmed the ground and dropped everything out the back, and then we'd have to clear the runway for the next plane coming in.
Wow.
And if it was Army, no, if we went out for a week or two, they'd give us enough sea rations to take care of this team, so we got fed. If we were with the Marines or the Army or the Green Berets, whatever movement that was, if we wanted hot food, we had to work with that unit because we work daylight operations only, they work 24/7. We'd pull perimeter duty for an hour, 2 hours, whatever, and get hot food.
How was the food overall? Not mentioning sea rats as far as...
Well, it depends how hungry you were. You know, that's kind of a thing you get attuned to.
All right.
There's always something that you don't like, but again, it all depends how hungry you are. I mean, if you've been on 2 or 3 days, been on the sea rations, and you get a chance to get some hot food, it don't make no difference what it is. It's good. But I will say, being on an Air Force base at Nhut, it was like going downtown in a restaurant. They had great food.
Oh yeah, I've noticed that being in 2 branches, the Army Guard and the Air Guard.
Yeah.
The Air Force definitely is like a restaurant compared to the others.
I got in the Air Force, and, you know, I mean, if you're going to serve your country, do it the best you can.
There you go. I get a lot of Vietnam vets say they hate rice. How do you feel about that?
I don't mind that at all. It never bothered me. Of course, the rice out in the field wasn't like the rice you go, like if you go down into Saigon, or there's places that's got some really good combinations of rice, and that it's never bothered me at all. If I didn't like it, I didn't eat it, you know. But there's a lot of it. There's, you know, you got the shrimp in there, you got the concoctions. You don't ask what's in it, you just eat it, you know.
Did you see a lot of rice paddies, people working in there?
A lot of country background. When I was stationed up in Phu Vien, and I have this on movies, I used to carry a Super 8 camera with me all the time. We were about 90 miles north of Saigon toward the Cambodian border, and that's when I left Nhut Air Base and went on this mobility unit. We got on a 2.5 truck and loaded it up. We weren't getting any supplies in. We didn't have no beer, no whiskey, no pop, no cigarettes. So 5 of us, I think it was, we filled this 2.5 full of sandbags and machine guns, and we took the back roads. I had all their money, and we took the back roads down to the PX in Nhut Air Base. One of the older guys that was there knew the back roads, and we went down there and loaded our 2.5 up, and it shows the countryside of all the Vietnamese in the rice fields. And if I can make a comment on that, one thing that I really learned when I was over there, my 2 tours of Vietnam, was the real losers of that war were the Vietnamese people out. All they wanted to do was have their little acre of field and raise their rice and live a normal little life. Then along comes the conflict, and the Americans come in, and of course they liked, you know, the Americans to be there for security. But then as the war got worse, the enemy would come in there and force them to give them all their food and hide their weapons, and if they didn't do that, they killed them. And then all of a sudden, then we'd come in on that same village, and if we found that stuff, we don't know if they're the enemies or whatever. So they were on a double-edged knife, and they were actually the real losers of that war.
It's a bad situation actually for you guys, and for especially the people living there.
And we didn't know from day to day who our friends and enemies were over there. That was probably one of the hardest issues to adjust to. World War II boys, it was real easy to tell who your enemies were. But in Korea the same way. But when we get into our conflict, because every era that we seem to get entangled to has different scenarios.
Oh, definitely.
And the flexibility of the American soldier to adapt to that speaks for what America is about.
Now, I've heard a lot of stories, and veterans have told me too, that children with bombs attached to them. Did you experience any of that?
I had had several encounters with that. When I first got over to Vietnam at Nhut Air Base, like I told you, I worked from 6 in the morning to 6 in the evening. And every squadron on the base had a orphanage that they worked with outside the base. And I got into that to occupy my off time. It seems real funny to talk about off time when the Marines and Army, they were in the field 24/7, didn't have any off time.
Oh yeah, I understand that, yeah.
Air Force was quite a different animal.
Sure.
So I started working with the orphanage and was connecting with our building in the Greenville area. Had letters in the newspaper, and they were sending clothes, little kids' clothes and stuffed animals. And when mail call came, I had to have a big truck to pick up all the stuff that was coming in from our community, and we were taking it to the orphanage. And I thought I was Mr. America GI, helping them, you know,
sure,
young and green, and not knowing the full picture yet. Well, after doing this for several months, I found out that the Hamlet chief, after we left, was taking all this stuff back and selling it on the black market. So I got a little kind of disappointed. What I'm trying to relate to you is that when I got there, I worked with the kids, and by the time I left there, I had turned so hard that you could see the scenario with the bombs and come strapped to the kids. I would have had no problem shooting a 7 or 8 year old coming at me. I mean, it was a roller coaster from one end to the other.
I've heard lots of stories from veterans and, of course, TV documentaries and even movies that some came running to you, they had bombs attached, or others just walked into the chow hall, be friendly. What did you experience?
Well, I never...
If you want to say anything.
Well, I have no problem about that. I had no one-to-one things with the bombs. But I was in areas that it happened, like down in Saigon and in the hamlets of like Phu Vien and Song Bay that I was in it. And when you go in, they have like little bomb stands. It's being a beer stand or getting a sandwich where the GIs hung out at, you know. And you always had the little boy who said, GI, you meat polish shoes, you know. You give them 10, 15 cents. Hellacious pickpockets.
Yeah.
You know, you got to be, and they'll crowd you. They'll crowd you and get around you. One will distract you, another will get you. At times it's comical, but other times, but you're on the alert so much. If a youngster comes toward you with like a jacket on, and it's 100-degree weather over there, if they're in their little shorts and t-shirts and that's all they got, then they're pretty safe, unless they had a hand grenade, which happens.
Sure.
You just had to be. I had to be more on, and not just me, other soldiers. They had to be on their toes more around the little kids, because you weren't mindset thinking having to shoot anybody.
Sure.
But you are the object that they want to get. So it was, you never ever had to let your guard down. Never let your guard down.
Okay, so is there any other offensive over there that you can remember that you had something to do with?
Well, toward the end of my tour, Phu Vien was our jump point after I left Nhut Air Base, and right next to us we had a helipad. Okay, now again we worked daylight operations only. We had probably 14, 15 guys running the strip. We were the only Air Force on that base. The rest were 1st Air Cav, whatever unit was there, and our daily, from sunrise to sunset, planes would come in with troops or ammunition or supplies, coming in, and then when they go out, we'd have 400 or 500 troops down in front of us. We were up on a hill, and then the airstrip, and where we loaded and unloaded the planes. We're waiting to get on flights to get out of there to go either to Saigon, Da Nang, wherever, to another big base, or go home. Mm-hmm. So we had to coordinate this back and forth, you know. And well, anyway, at the end of the day, we'd go back up into our hooch and make our food and whatever, you know. I got to tell you this: the very first flight of the day, coming in at sunrise, was perishables for the base that we were on. Sure. And 4 or 5 skids of food. Occasionally, a pack of steaks or hamburgers or whatever would fall off that skid, you know. And that pretty much that's how we survived over there, having other than hot food, you know, canned food. Mm-hmm. So I mean, again, we survived. But now, getting back to the story, at night, the helipads, the helicopters, they'd go out and work out. We'd get up on the roof at night and have a couple cold beers, you know, and watch them. You know, all you see is that red stream going down there and taking care of the enemy. We were surrounded a couple of times up there with over 10,000 MBA. And they found the tunnel complexes and everything. But anyway, at the end of the night, helicopter pilots come down, and they knew we always had beer and pop, hamburgers, whatever. So they'd get done doing their thing, and then they'd come over to our hooch, and we got to be pretty good friends with them. Mm-hmm. Well, toward the end of my second tour over there, warrant officer come over and say, "Look, we got a little bit of issue here. We got a couple spots open for door gunner because they haven't rotated in, and we want to volunteer." Well, being Teflon, 19 years old, mm-hmm. Hell yeah, you know, I'm sitting there on the airstrip getting my ass beat up every day with rockets and mortars and not seeing the enemy. Uh-huh. Now I get a chance to get up and see the enemy. Yeah. And take care of a little remorse, I guess you'd say. And we mainly flew reconnaissance, but every time we got called in on support, and there was several. I don't even know what that, you know, I wasn't pertinent to whatever mission they called it or whatever. I was just with them taking care of what I could take care of, you know. Sure. And it was an experience.
Oh yeah, I betcha. So obviously most people know where Saigon's at. You mentioned Da Nang. What is that? A place or a city? What is that? That's
a big city, bigger than. Well, it's as big, let's put it this way, as Nhut Air Base. Cam Ranh Bay, beautiful place, on the beach, and that's where your navies come in and do their dropping their supplies off and the guys out on boats and whatnot. You got Da Nang, you had Cam Ranh Bay, you had Nhut Air Base. Those were the big ones. The other ones were, probably not much bigger than, if as big as, the Greenville Airport. Okay. Little airstrips, and there might be down the street there, if it was like Phu Vien or Song Bay, there'd be a little community outside of there, not about like the size of Smyrna. Yeah. Okay. Where the people lived there. Very often, very little did we get into, could have, but we never went down into the little hamlet towns. We mm-hmm. stayed pretty much on the base because very unsafe. At night they turn into your enemy. Right. So there was nothing down there that interested me or anybody else too much down there. But they'd associate with them occasionally, but not too often.
You mentioned Smyrna. That's a town just west of here. I know how big it is, but you're gonna have to explain how big it is so people can relate to that.
You got a little gas station there, and a bar, and a town hall, and a barber shop, I think it is.
Okay, all right. That way people can relate to that. Right. So, okay, so about you said 2 tours, which is 2 years, obviously.
A year and a half.
Year and a half.
You got the first year is a year. You do an extension, and it's another half a year on top of it.
Okay. And you volunteered for that second term?
Yeah, the reason I did that, and it was kind of foolish looking at it today, but it wasn't when I was there. When I got there in '67, 6 months into my tour, the guys that were leaving were coming back again, getting hit for another year. You know, so I said I did not want to go back, because it was pretty heavy battling going on in '67 and '68. I didn't want to go back to the States and get readjusted and then have to pull up and come over again.
Right.
So, plus you got some bennies. You got to be put on the top of the R&R rest and recuperation list and to go wherever you wanted to go. Plus you got a 30-day leave going home, free gratis. Plus you got your base of choice when you go back. When you get ready to rotate back, you tell them where you want to go, and you know that was a little bit of an issue with me. But with Gerald Ford, he looked at because they didn't give me my base of choice.
Yeah.
After being wounded twice and not getting the respect, even after they told him, of course, that's a recruiting thing back in those days.
Right.
I made him stick to it. Gerald Ford, before my 30 days were up after I left Vietnam, I had to report back to Dover, or Travis Air Force Base at the time. That's where my orders were cut for. And I wanted to go to Dover, back on the East Coast. And he got it changed, so I got back to Dover for my last remaining months of the service.
Now you're going to have to explain Gerald Ford. I know he was represented, but you have to tell people he wasn't president then.
He was a U.S. Senator, and from Michigan. And I'd had several encounters with him in Belding. He used to come to our Labor Day parade.
Oh yeah.
So, very good veterans advocate. I got my first Purple Heart was awarded to me by the governor of Dover when I went back the second time. They had a thing called Dover Delawares, and the governor of Delaware gave me my first Purple Heart. And he got the letter in Washington, D.C. and wrote me a handwritten letter thanking me for the service. Well, the thanks goes from me to him for helping me out in the military, you know.
Sure.
So there was a kind of a welcoming thing there, and it was kind of, if I may speak on this, I might be a little ahead of myself. When I come home, when I extended my tour in Vietnam, it was a week later. I was on a truck. They got hit. We were loaded with captured ammo, and there were 7 of us on the truck. 2 of us got off alive. And I was in the hospital. I was in the hospital when I because I was coming home in the 30 days to get married in between my tours, and did get married, but I still had shrapnel in my head. And my family doctor, they wouldn't take I had a big hunk right at the top of my head, and they wouldn't take it out. So Doc in Deno, I went to him and I said, Doc, I need your help here. I said, I'm going to get married in about 3 days, and I got this big lump on my head with shrapnel in it. Will you take it out? And he said, let's see. So he looked at it and said, yeah, no problem, sit down. And he froze it, lanced it, cut it out, sewed it up. Couldn't even hardly tell, just a little hair missing there, you know. And I gave him the piece of shrapnel, and he says, I'll send the bill to the Air Force. I said, that sounds good. $75, $80, no big thing.
How much would you think it'd be now?
Oh, God, yeah. Under Obamacare, I could probably thousands. Anyway, so I get married, and I end up go back to Vietnam. And about a month back in Vietnam, I get a letter from Doc and Deno saying the Air Force refused to to pay for it because it wasn't a matter of life and death. He said, but don't worry about the bill. He says, I'll take the bill. That's the least I can do for what you're doing for us in our country. You know? Not
nice.
Knowing at the time, until I built this wall, he was one of the most decorated veterans in our community.
In World War II?
In World War II.
Wow. Do you know where he served? Europe or Pacific?
I could probably run that up for you, but I don't know right off the top of my head.
That's fine. That's fine.
Him and John Geisen was another very highly decorated individual. They were both alive when I did this wall, but they have passed now. But going back to what the doc did for me, and when it come time for me to get out of the service, you get this, they call you into the office and try to get you to re-up. And I held all these papers with the doc and everything. And when I went in there, he's trying to tell me all my benefits. They threw this paperwork down on his desk. It was a master sergeant. And I said, do you want to tell me what my benefits are now? I said, I got my ass blowed up twice in Vietnam, and my own doctor had to take shrapnel out, and they wouldn't pay him for it. So I said, no, you can't tell me what my benefits are, you know. And he says, Sergeant, I says, I don't blame you a bit. He says, you're excused. And he says, by the way, he says, probably the best thing, he says, because your files are stamped politically influenced. So when Senator Ford went back to the Air Force and said, no, you will send him from Travis to Dover, they stamped my file political influence, so I had no future in the Air Force anyway.
Yeah, Gerald Ford was really good.
He was really excellent.
And actually, I don't mean to correct you, but he was our U.S. rep.
U.S. rep.
Yeah,
I
but
said senator.
He seems like a senator, that's for sure, yeah. But he was definitely excellent, because he was a veteran himself, you know, in the Navy.
Correct.
World War II and stuff. But yeah, I've had a lot of people had good complaints about him, including yourself, obviously. But anyway, before we go on further, I want to back up. You didn't really mention how you got injured with a shrapnel in your head with a Purple Heart. Then you got injured again, right?
I was on a forklift up at Phu Vien, unloading a plane with about 35,000 pounds of ammunition on it. And we had two planes down on the ground. We were working both the planes, and we started getting rockets and mortars in. And I was the forklift driver on the back of the plane, like an ATV, not a conventional forklift. Tires were bigger than I was. And anyway, so that's how we loaded and unloaded the airplane. Well, we started getting rockets. Well, when you're behind those engines, they don't turn them off when you're, you know, and all you do is you're around yourself, and then all of a sudden you see the explosions around you. Everybody ran for the bunker, and I had one guy inside the plane, and we motioned to each other, and we had 2 pallets to go unload, so we stayed behind the plane and unloaded it. I set it off, went back in for the last pallet, got it on. After I got it out of the plane, then he took off out of the plane for the bunker, and as I loaded dropped the pallet down and was taken off with the forklift, I got blown off the forklift and got hit with shrapnel again.
Yeah, that was when you got injured in the head, the shrapnel?
No, that was the first one.
First one, and what?
That was on the truck that got hit and blown up.
Okay, and you got injured where at?
Phu Vien. That was Nhut.
No, I mean on your body.
Oh, I got it all down in front of me.
Okay.
I had a guy in front of me, and when we got hit, he went in about 20 different directions because it hit in front of him, and I got hit with all the shrapnel that went through him and blew me like 50 foot off out.
What were your thoughts of what was going on at the time, or was it just too quick?
I had, you know, it was one of those things, your adrenaline is rushing. I never felt a thing. The other guy that lived lost a leg. The other guys they were just totally destroyed.
Yeah.
when I was in the hospital and got out, I had to laugh. Guy come out, and I didn't know none of these guys. They were all Army that was on there, and I was the only Air Force because we had this captured ammo. So that got to be kind of an issue to me in wrestling with this in my years past, not knowing who the guys were you were on the truck with that got killed. But that's something you just deal with, you know. But
yeah.
Anyway, when I got out of the operating room, the other guy came out about an hour after I did, and they had given him a spinal, and you know, so he couldn't feel nothing from the waist down. And I'll never forget this. We were sitting there talking with each other, and he made the nurse put a flashlight on his privates to make sure he still had his junk.
We don't need to get into that very much, but I understand. We understand what you mean. All right. So basically, was there medical personnel that come out and helped you right away?
Tried to. We had another catastrophe on top of that. We were on the opposite side of the base by the ammo dump. We got 2 flight lines in front of us, and a taxi runway into us. Well, when we got hit, the ambulance came over from the other side of the base, crossed one runway, crossed the second runway, and got broadsided by a C-130 and was taken off. So it killed I don't know how many people were in the ambulance. It killed 2 people in the C-130 and crashed the C-130. And then helicopters came in and got this other guy and myself out and took us to the hospital just outside the base in Saigon.
So then when you got to the hospital and you got to recuperating, was there any other shrapnel in your body besides in your head, or?
Well, yeah,
took a while to get
after they got the bigger pieces out.
Okay.
But it was kind of comical because they told me a lot of the other shrapnel will work its way out. And at Tonsonot Air Base, we have cubicles of 4 airmen, bunk beds on either side, and then you got a table in the middle and a little cooler for your sandwiches or food or whatever. Well, at night, we'd all be getting around together, and they all, of course, you know, they all wanted, you know, see how I was and everything. I got to be the center of attraction because they'd take a handkerchief and run it on me like this, and when it would snag, then they'd pull the pieces of shrapnel off.
Oh, okay.
Because it worked. Yeah, that was like a month that stuff was coming out. You know,
sure.
So.
Now, that was before you came back and got married?
That was, yeah.
Okay.
About 2 months before I come back.
And then you came back, got married, and the doctor helped you get the shrapnel out of your head.
Right.
You got married. How did your wife feel about you going back? Obviously. I mean,
probably worse than I did.
Yeah.
Of course, you know, what I went through, if I had come back unscathed and then say, okay, look, I'm fine going back, well, it didn't happen that way. Of course, there was a lot of concern.
Sure.
But it is what it is, and I had to do what I had to do, you know. So, and every day I had a letter from my wife. We're still married 48 years later today.
Wow, that's great. Well, we'll get into your family history a little bit later. That is the hardest job in the service, being a spouse or a family member behind.
I'm sure it is.
We've all been told that, you know, and stuff, and I can definitely understand that.
Yeah.
So anyway, when you get back to Vietnam, you got injured again, right?
Right.
Another Purple Heart.
When I come back, I was still assigned to. No, I wasn't either. I got to take that back. After they told me to take as much time as I need to get my head together.
Sure.
Did I want to go back in the ammo dump? And I said, no, I didn't want to go back in the ammo dump. Well, what job do you want? Because they were pretty much, my base commander and my squadron commander, they were doing everything they could to assist me and keeping together and everything, you know. And And I said, I want to get on that mobility team that travels around. So everything up to that point was pretty much cut and dry, what you had to do every day in the ammo dump. When you're on that mobility unit, every day is a different day, and you're going different places. And so that's what I went to, and kept myself much busier, put myself out there a little bit more than being down on a secure base like Nhut. But if I was going to be over there, I wanted to be active and not get into a regiment.
Okay. So, how did you get into the second time?
It was about damn near a year, almost the same month. And I was on the flight line at Phu Vien unloading airplanes when we started getting the rockets and mortars in, which I told you about. We stayed, me and my other airmen stayed back and unloaded the plane while the rockets and mortars were coming in.
So, how did you get injured? I'm sorry.
I was unloading an airplane with ammunition on it.
Okay.
And my buddy stayed on the plane, pushing the pallet onto me on the forklift and taking it over and setting it off. And when we got the last pallet off, I put it off. Of course, he took off out of the plane, and I took off with the ATV and got hit coming up, traveling with the ATV with a rocket, mortar rocket that came in.
Okay. And how was your injury?
And didn't feel a damn thing. I was too scared. I got shrapnel on my back and down the back of my legs as I was
okay.
running.
Was it a very serious injury?
No, they have what they call a MASH unit up north, and it wasn't superficial. They had to try and dig some of them out, but they were good enough to where they could put clamps on them versus stitches.
Okay, now all this time here, you mentioned 1967. The second time you went back was at 68 then?
I was there 67, 68, and 69.
Okay. A little offbeat question for you here. Obviously 68 was a bad year for this country, including Vietnam, of course. Martin Luther King being shot, Bobby Kennedy being shot. Quite a lot of unrest over here, not in Vietnam, of course. But there were some rays of hope, especially here in Michigan, as far as being a sports fan, and you know what I'm talking about now.
Yeah.
How did you? Are you a Tiger fan?
Oh yes.
Okay. How did you guys feel from Michigan? The Tigers were winning that big, and
well,
the World Series.
We'd have liked to have been here to share that with them.
Sure.
But it sort of brought home a little closer to us over there.
Sure.
You know, and bragging rights for Michigan.
Oh yeah.
You know, everybody brags about where they're from. And kick the bobo, you know.
Sure.
And, yeah, we had our good times.
And how quickly did you know that the Tigers won the World Series or were doing that good?
Well, they had public military broadcasting over there.
Radio and TV?
Yeah, radio. Well, the TV. If any of the Marines hear this thing, they're going to say, "Yeah, you're right. He was in Vietnam." In the evening, they had, I think, 3 hours of military TV. They had the radio over there, and they had a station in Saigon, and I think Da Nang had one too, where if you watch Good Morning America or Good Morning Vietnam,
right? Yeah,
you know, that was a true story. But they that was like when that transition came in, it was like before I got there. When I got there, it was all about, you know, the rock and roll and and all that stuff. So we had that radio there. So in the evenings we could listen to that. During the day we didn't have much time because we were out, you know, and of course the ground pounders, the Marines and the Army guys, they had radios out in the field when they weren't constantly, you know, on patrols and stuff like that. So it was a little bit of piece of home. It could bring us together.
Sure.
You know, and on the flip side of the coin, my unit, my experiences, I didn't have near the experiences that the guys had out in the jungle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we had downtime, and we had blacks and whites together.
Sure.
And in my experience with our group, we didn't have a drug problem. We didn't have very little racial problems. Mm-hmm. But when we got into areas where we'd put out a party for the guys rotating back, and like I said, we only had 12, 13 guys up on Phu Vien. But the guys surrounding us, we had a lot of friends, and they'd invite us to the party that they were going to, or we'd invite them to one of our parties that we put on for whatever, you know. And you get a lot of the Afro-Americans together, and with Martin Luther King, the riots in Detroit, it was an issue.
Sure.
It was an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And thank God I didn't have to deal with radical issues on our day-to-day operation, where I know that it was in the field.
Sure.
They thought that they were being put on lead, the blacks on lead, or put into more dangerous conditions. I never heard that personally from anybody, but there was a lot of issues about the racial riots, and that's pretty much what we centered on. We caught bits and pieces about the protests about the Vietnam War. Didn't really grasp that. We knew there was some silly people out there, you know, that didn't earn their draft cards, didn't want to come over. I had a real attitude in my mind with draft dodgers more than anybody else. About 3-4 years after I got back from Vietnam, I sort of got over that, simply because what we were fighting for over in Vietnam for the South Vietnamese was to have their choice. So if you take that on the other side of the coin, these guys that did not want to go to Vietnam, they were Americans, they had the choice.
Sure.
Even though the draft said, no, you got to go. And they went, so they wouldn't have to get killed. It wasn't about what we were over there for, because they didn't want to get their butts killed. And we know that.
Sure.
So I sort of just, I've run into a couple people in my 40-some years after being out of Vietnam that were objectors, I guess you'd call them. I don't want to call them draft dodgers.
Right.
And I don't get upset with them.
Sure.
That was their choice, and that they were an American. Now, they were granted amnesty to come back, which I might not agree with that, but if America wasn't good enough for them then, it shouldn't be ever.
Right.
But,
well, before we get more into that stuff there too, let's go back to the end of your tours in Vietnam. Obviously, we mentioned 68 with the Tigers, uplifting a lot of guys, mainly from Michigan. I don't know, did you run anybody that was a Cardinals fan? Was out there?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay,
you know.
all right. Just curiosity.
Yeah.
There was another positive event that was at the end of the year in '68 in December. I'm not sure if you're aware, but I'll mention it. It was the first time that we circled the moon. We didn't land on it, obviously, at the end of '68. Did you hear about that?
I was home on, that was in '69.
Yep. Well, it was at the end of '68, but when we actually landed on the moon, Neil Armstrong was in July
20th.
Right. But before that, in '68, Jim Lovell, who was later famous because of the Apollo 13 mission, he actually orbited the moon first time with a couple other astronauts.
Oh, yeah.
And history records that you guys saved '68. You know, which is, did you hear about that at all, or was that just kind of a side note
Well,
that you didn't hear?
You had it in what we had a newspaper. If we could get our hands on it, was USA or not USA? It was. God, I used to save those papers. We had a military newspaper.
Sure, yeah.
And you know, it would be in there, and that's where we read about it, or we, you know, they had a news station, you know, on the radio station and talking about it. But the TV stations we had over there, it wasn't like up-to-date things that are going on.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
I mean,
sure.
Laugh-In,
Yeah.
Combat, crazy shows, you know.
What was the famous shows over there that you guys got to watch that you talked about on your off time?
Laugh-In.
Laugh-In? Okay.
Yeah, you sort of took the series Combat that was on there all the time.
Sure.
We sort of laughed and chuckled with that because of it being TV and
Sure.
realistic stuff, and but Laugh-In, it sort of uplifted us. It was funny as hell.
Oh yeah.
You know,
sure. I remember Laugh-In. Yeah. How about any other TV shows like Gilligan's Island, Beverly Hillbillies, Star Trek?
You know, I can't. Those two stick to my mind more than anything else.
Sure.
And I'm sure there was some other things on there, but you know, because I think we had 2.5, 3 hours.
Sure.
And, you know, but I can't remember.
Sure. Well, other Vietnam vets mentioned those shows to me a lot too.
Yeah.
So Laugh-In's one of them too, obviously. The music of the time. Did you guys have access
California Dreamin'? Oh yeah, we used to have a patio. I don't know what you want to call it. It's and you could go in and get pop or a candy bar. And they had a jukebox in there.
Sure.
And we used to play all the songs that were in our area before we went over there, and you know, it just sort of brought us back home a little bit more. You know.
Sure.
It was cool.
Yeah. Definitely need that in the service.
I had, talking about that, I had occasionally, maybe once a week or so, on my off day, I'd go down into Saigon, and I had this one restaurant that I went to and felt pretty comfortable in, and they had, now you got to remember, this is in '67, early 60 or late '67. They had a jukebox in there, and you put a quarter in it, and it had a screen above it, just like our MTV and stuff like we have today. And that was '67. That was, I really enjoyed that. You know, they had one American song on there. I played all the time when I went in there, but then they had French songs and
Sure.
You know, but it was kind of neat. That was back in '67.
Sure. Yeah. Did you ever get to see Bob Hope on his tour?
See Bob Hope. They had 2 of his shows when I was over there. I got to one of his shows. The other one I couldn't get back to see.
How did that feel to all of you?
Oh, it was heartbreaking. I mean, it was great while it went on. You know, but boy, what a slammer after it's all over. You know, you get to see these fine-looking women and your American people and having a good time and thanking the troops, and then before you know it, it's all over and back to the same grind again.
Yeah. Okay, now back to '68 one more time, if you don't mind. When you all heard the news, you mentioned King and how it affected the African Americans and stuff. When you mentioned King being shot, how did everybody feel when Bobby Kennedy was shot?
Devastated. Devastated. We knew that was going to be our gateway out of Vietnam. If that would have happened, and everybody knew it, because if John F. Kennedy would not have been assassinated, we wouldn't have been over in Vietnam, or to the magnitude that we were at.
Right.
And it was devastating, and there was a lot of love for that man over there, and future for our country.
All right. So when you left Vietnam, what was the date when you came back home to the States?
It wasn't pretty.
I mean, when did you come back?
Oh, I come back in '69.
Okay.
In May of '69.
And you went back to Dover Air Force Base for a while.
Yeah.
And then, anyway, go ahead and explain the reaction when you got back.
Well, on my flight from Hawaii to San Francisco, you know, I was in another world, trying to pinch myself that I was back in the United States with all the close calls that I had and everything, and just wanted to get back to a normal life. I stayed in my uniform because I was proud to be in my uniform. I noticed a lot of guys changing on the airplane into civilian clothes, and I couldn't quite grasp that for a second, you know. Well, 15 minutes on the ground in San Francisco, I'm in a fight in the terminal.
You yourself?
Myself. I got spit on, all this, you know, and I wasn't sitting still for that. Protesters, I mean, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Very disrespectful.
We weren't the problem. You know, I mean, we were the solution, but in doing what we were supposed to do as military people. Well, I had a security guard on both sides of me, flight out, and from Frisco to Gerald Ford, I mean, I was screwed up in my mind. I said, man, what's going to happen to me at the next stop, you know?
Yeah.
And is my own hometown going to treat me like that?
Back up just a little bit. You said you got in a fight. Was it a fist fight or wrestling or what was it?
I hit the guy that spit on me.
Okay.
And then he come back at me. Of course, that's what they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so he spit on me and called me a baby killer, and so didn't make me feel too good.
Yeah. And then that's when the security guys got you out of there?
Yeah. I mean, there was a tussle between other military people and myself when that broke out. Mm-hmm. And the security came in and grabbed me and escorted me down to my next gate.
Okay.
Now I'm going to tell you the other side of the coin. I was a little worried about from Frisco to Gerald Ford. And folks didn't know I was coming home right at that time. They knew I was coming home, but I wanted to kind of surprise them. So I'm in my uniform, and I got my duffel bag with all my clothes in it and everything. And I get off and get into my Gerald Ford, nothing, which made me feel a lot better. And I'm going through the terminal, and I got this my duffel bag and in uniform. He says, "Soldier, where are you going?" And I says, "Well, I just got back from Vietnam and heading home and surprising my family." He says, "Where do you live?" And I says, "Belding." Drove me right to my doorstep.
Wow. That's great. It really is. It really is.
So,
do you know the guy's name?
You know, I gave him a hug and shook his hand, and
wow.
Off he went.
I'll have to correct you again if you don't mind me. You mentioned Gerald Ford Airport. It wasn't named that. It was Kent County Airport.
County Airport.
Just so everybody knows that.
Yeah.
So, but I know what you meant, but just make sure everybody knows that. That is fantastic, Denny. That's wow. So you're back home. You surprised your parents and your wife. How was that?
Well, that was Christmas. It was Christmas. Yeah, it was a lot of hoopla.
Yeah.
And town was like I never left it.
Wow.
You know, people glad to see me home. It was like I was in a vacuum with all this other craziness, misbuilding.
Was it hard adjusting back to civilian life after that?
Yeah, yes, most definitely. You learn how to be more aware. You know, when you're over there, you had to be more aware of things around you and what you did. You know, where you placed yourself. It took a while. It took a while to be in a safe zone like this, to where you could let your guard down.
Okay, now you're pretty much settled in. I'll get into a little bit more of your personal life. You mentioned a while back about you actually met your biological father in the service. Was it in the service, or go ahead and explain that?
When I had received my orders to go to Vietnam, my mom was my real mom. Okay, my dad was my stepfather.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was about 14 years old, I still hung on to my real name, which was Grossman.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked my dad, I says, when can I change my name to your name,
mm-hmm.
to Craycraft? He says, whenever you want, it's your decision. Well, I never knew anything about my dad. My mom never talked to me about my dad. It was my aunts and uncles that always told me what a jerk he was, what a drunk he was. Never around. He wasn't even around when I was born. So, you know, that sort of ate on me for a long time, and my aunt gave me his address. And, you know, things will swell up in front of you, you know, over time.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad told me, he knew it bothered me. What had happened, Dad had sent my real dad a letter stating to sign these papers so he could change his name from Grossman to Craycraft.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he balked on that. Well, then Dad wrote him another letter and said, look, you never paid any support in all your life with this guy. And he says, either you sign these papers or we're coming after you for support. Boom, here comes the paperwork back.
Wow.
Okay, so that sort of told me. And I thought he was kind of a jerk. Anyway, so my dad, he knew it was bothering me. He said, Denny, sit down, write a letter to him and tell him what you think. You know, Dad never said anything to me about him. And he says, when you get all your frustration out of you, he says, tear the letter up. Did that. Accepted that. When I graduated from high school, I happened to know where my grandmother lived on his side.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sent a graduation card and picture to them. They lived down around Kalamazoo someplace. And here about 4 or 5 days later, I get the invitation and the picture back. And all it said is that you gave up a lot of money when you changed your name. Like money meant anything, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So then I turned around and I put a stamp in an envelope and wrote up on the letter that I didn't want you to waste your money for the stamp, and I sent her a stamp back. But going back to my father, my aunt told me he still lives in Santa Cruz, California. So I had like a day-and-a-half layover in Frisco before I had to connect my flight going to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
So I had his name, his address, and I looked it up in the phone book, and I called him on the phone. This had to be 10 o'clock at night.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get an answer, and this guy answers the phone, and I said, is this Bill Grossman? He says, yes. And I said, do you know who this is? And he says, I have no idea. I said, this is your son. He says, Denny? I said, yeah. He says, where are you at? And I told him, you know, where I was going. He's 200 miles away. He drove up to see me, took me back down to his house because I had a whole day yet to deal with. Met his wife and my half brothers and sisters. Not having any brothers or sisters,
right?
They were all small. You know, thought it was unique, and I told him, I said, look, I says, whatever was between Mom and you back then was your thing. I hold no remorse about it. I says, met you, say hi, let you know I have no hard feelings, and let it go. Next day, he took me back up to Frisco, flew out, never had any contact with him. Now I know I'm coming home for 30 days to get married. So I had souvenirs from my step brothers and sisters. And I called him up and he came up and got me again. We went down there and I gave him, you know, spent a day with him, and then he took me back up. Never told him I was going home to get married. Nothing, and you know, that was just a closure in my life.
Right.
And didn't want, my dad doesn't even know, before he died, he never even knew I went to see him. I didn't want to hurt my dad's feelings.
Right.
So I kept that as it was. So that was my experience meeting my first, or my biological father.
Okay.
And hasn't been bad. I kind of wish, now my daughter has had contact with my half-sister by computer.
Right.
And this
Facebook probably, yeah.
Right. And even on the phone, because they got in contact with each other. I never had no contact with them. I probably should have. My biological father was still alive then. He was getting close to going out. He had a heart attack. And I didn't go out. And when he did pass away, my stepsister got a hold of Holly and let her know that he passed away. Said he had a box in his possession that the kids were never supposed to touch or open or anything while he was alive. And it was the pictures of him and me when I went to visit him.
Oh, wow.
And when he died, they opened up the box and the stuff was there. So.
Wow. That's quite a story for that right there. Okay, now, back to more personal life. You got married. How many children do you have?
I have a boy and a girl. Bill, my son, he's 45 now, and 46. And my daughter is 39.
Okay. And grandchildren?
I've got 4, 2 of each. I've got, well, 3 boys, 3 grandsons and 1 granddaughter.
Okay.
2 from each, 2 from my son and 2 from my daughter.
Now, did your children or your grandchildren ever serve in the military?
No.
Okay.
No, they haven't.
Okay.
So, which doesn't bother me a bit.
Yeah, I've heard it both ways.
Yeah.
But okay, now we're back, like your family life, all that. Obviously, you probably kept tabs of the war after you left.
Oh yeah.
Then you mentioned draft dodgers, protesters, burning the draft cards. There's different types of draft dodgers, I heard. Some that went to Canada, some that joined the National Guard. Just tell me about that. How you felt.
At the time, I was being squeezed into a corner, and not a lot of my friends, but some of my friends that I know, my cousin was one of them. He would have never made it in the military, but they went to college, so they got deferred from the draft to go to the college. They weren't what you call draft dodgers, but they dodged the bullet. Right. So it was one of those things after I got out of the military, not so much while I was in. I kept myself pretty busy while I was in doing what I had to do to keep my life straight. And after I got out, it was more or less I've accepted the thing that's your life. You do what you got to do.
Right.
I have no regrets. I have no regrets of what I did, and I have no regrets for being over there and fighting an unpopular war. I think I did, when we were over there, I thought what we were doing was just, even though I knew the deck was stacked against us.
Sure.
But it is what it is, and you had to survive daily to get back to reality.
Sure. Now, the war officially ended for us and for, of course, the whole country, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, in 75, and by that time Gerald Ford was president. Okay, just tell me your feelings on when it ended, and also tell me the feelings how you felt for President Ford, what he was probably going through. Because
well, I know he wasn't a popular Vietnam War factor into the game, and he stepped into that position granting Nixon immunity. Again, our government fixing things, not answering up to what it should be. As far as the war ending, I was really, really happy to see our MIAs and POWs come home, and what they had to go through, and when they came back. Of course, our veterans organizations were always a strong advocate of our POWs, and we know that even today that they're not all back, and there was a lot of underhanded stuff. And in fact, I just found out here a few months ago that our government gave the North Vietnamese millions of dollars to cut the MIAs, POWs loose.
Oh.
So it wasn't a gesture, a good gesture on the North to let them loose.
Right.
As it was presented, it was a buy-off.
Right. Now, how did you feel towards Ford? Ford didn't like the fact that he was president when we lost the war. Me personally, I felt we never really lost the war, but
we did not lose the war. I have that. I will never, ever, you'll never hear the word lost war come out of my mouth, being a Vietnam veteran. We got our ass beat up over there, but in all the other conflicts in the past, with the exception maybe the Korean War, we could have, in a year's time, had that taken care of.
Sure.
We had the ability to do it. And it wasn't the soldier that supposedly lost the conflict, it was our government and how they handled that. That it wasn't us. We did our job to the utmost. And in Michigan there was 2,654 Vietnam veterans that never made it home because of our politics in that war.
Now, trying to think, next question I'll be saying here as we move through time here. Okay, the country celebrated its bicentennial anniversary, obviously, in '76. I remember that. How did you feel being a veteran that you finally saw that?
Well,
being so close to being the end of the war, after the war ended.
You know, I had mixed feelings on that. The fact that even though I don't feel that we were treated right by our own government over there and fighting the war, but our country has got where it's gotten on making decisions probably like that, I guess. I don't know. I'm not that deep into politics, but we're doing something right with the way we're living today, and the other countries around us are trying to be like us.
Sure.
And trying to attack us. Some of them are because they're jealous of us. We're going to be stronger than that. I mean, this year, I mean, we're under a lot of stress, and I feel real bad right now that I feel we've let a lot of our allies out.
Sure.
And I hope that gets changed around, but to stay strong, to have another millennium of freedom in this world.
Sure.
I mean, you have to, when you hit that kind of milestone, you have to think about where you have been. As long as you don't forget your past, you'll know where you're going in the future.
Sure. When you found out that the men that decided not to go to Vietnam, we'll make a politically correct statement here, was basically given amnesty to come home, how did you and your fellow veterans feel?
A lot of veterans didn't like that. If I'd have got radical or got upset tremendously about it, where it would have got me?
Yeah.
It wouldn't have got me nowhere other than what I'm doing today. So I guess it's one of those things that I took the attitude that every individual has to answer for themselves and what they did. It's not for me to answer to them. I mean, do I get attitude? Yeah, I get attitudes.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah. So anyway, now we're like coming up to the 1980s. Before I get into that real quick, I always ask veterans how they felt towards their commander-in-chiefs, the president that you served under. And then yours was obviously Johnson and Nixon. I mean, you don't have to be all...
I understand. I was disappointed, not because where I was at,
sure,
but how they were making us handle it.
Sure.
And that's the only displeasure that I had.
Okay.
And Johnson had to live with what he was dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure he had a lot of to do with not letting us fight it the way we want, but he was trying to probably hold the hatch down on the United States, as well as trying to do what was handed to him when he became in as president. I wasn't in love with the guy, don't get me wrong, but I mean, I've got worse ideas on the one we got now.
Right. How about Nixon? I mean, obviously most of his time was after you got out. He was the one that really started downsizing.
He was definitely being forced to do that, only because now he's handed the bag of worms that we're getting our butts kicked over there because our government won't let us fight it the way it should have been fought.
Right.
If we'd have stayed on top of Hanoi with the bombing, none of that would have happened. None of those people would have been coming down Ho Chi Minh Trail and fighting us. It'd have been done and over with. We'd have just had to do the mop up with the radicals within the South.
Sure.
And he knew they were too far to pull back or put more people in there because it was already unpopular, tremendously. So he was his advisors forced him to do what he had to do, and of course he was looking for another bite out of the apple pie, and was doing things illegal and got caught doing it, and he was being knocked out the box. So I guess justice came back around.
Okay, so 1980, Reagan took over from Jimmy Carter after winning the election. The Iranian hostage crisis, how did you feel during that?
Again, I was disappointed in our government.
Yeah.
Should have never let that happen.
Yeah.
Same scenario with when our sailors just got their ship hijacked and they were on their knees, and you know, that should never happen.
Right.
I mean, our people were over there to help the Tehran and help the people, and then the radicals come in there and took us hostage, and I mean, we should have went in there balls to the walls to get them out of there.
Sure.
And there wouldn't have been one soldier that would have, or I want to say this and be politically correct.
Sure.
I don't think our people in this country would have said a damn word if they'd have went in there with 1,000 troops to go in there to save those soldiers or those hostages.
Do you think it was an after effect of Vietnam, just to kind of hold back type thing?
It's a fear factor, but you know, I want to say one thing to make this very clear. When we got treated the way we did when we come back from Vietnam, the VFW people and the American Legion people that were Vietnam veterans, well, let me put it this way, Vietnam veterans, we committed to ourselves we would never allow another veteran to come home and be treated like that. And I think we've accomplished that through many different factors with the VFW and the American Legion, the DAV.
Yep.
And that being said, that the other conflicts, even though there's now the one we've got in there now, I would rather lose 10 soldiers in a conflict that was right to keep our how do I want to say this, our stature to where it should be as a leader in the United States if they were fighting for something that was justified.
Right.
Instead of drawing a line in the sand and letting the guys walk over it again and doing nothing. We lost so much respect, and I don't know where we're going in the future if it stays on that same page. Right. Versus the other one. The other one can scare you a little bit. You know, there ain't going to be no free lunches over here. But, you know, and we're a country that has heart like no other and will fight and are trained and got the capability to not bully any other country. We don't have to bully nobody, but I mean when they're turning around and now they're sending them over here and killing innocent people over here, I think we should be dealing with that. But that again, that's my own view on that.
Sure. All right, real quick. In the 1980s, when Reagan was president, there was a lot of one-man army things by Stallone and who was that other guy? Missing in Action guy, Chuck Norris movies.
Yeah.
How did you feel about them?
Laugh. There's a couple movies out there that represent a pretty close way we lived over there. It's kind of comical where when you get First Blood or Chuck Norris and his Missing in Action type 1, 2, 3. You know, we kind of, when we read comic books, we always want to be the hero.
Sure.
When we read a comic book, when we're a kid, we want to grow up to be like that. And I'm sure that there are young Americans that weren't soldiers that would like to be that man in the military. You know, but to be a military individual and see that is kind of comical. Yeah. You know, in your mind, when you're in a situation over there, God, wouldn't it have been nice if we could have had somebody like that? You know? Yeah,
there's no doubt about it. We'd have taken over North Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. But to watch Rambo, it's like seeing Superman not get hit by bullets and fly in the air. But finally, Oliver Stone came out with this movie Platoon like in 85, 86.
Good movie.
How did you feel about that?
Very close. It showed the frustration of the soldier out in the field, as well as going through basic training, and people going through basic training and what they think they can expect when they get there. I thought I had no problem with Platoon at all. I could see the frustration, and it portrayed the frustration and the conflicts that the soldiers had amongst each other. Sure. I mean, you get hardcore soldiers there that get hardened, and they've been over there for over a year and lost their friends, so they don't take friends no more, and they are hardcore against the enemy. Then you get another guy in there with a softer heart. That ain't right. You can't do that, you know. And the fights that they get in amongst themselves, it's realistic. It's realistic.
Was it pretty emotional for you and your fellow veterans to watch that movie so close to being like it is? Or was it more gratifying that you finally get that out, that what it was really like?
That was it. That was in play, as well as it brought back a lot of close times over there, and so I mean, there's a lot of mixed feelings. A lot of veterans handled their thing in a different way, so it's really kind of hard to answer that, just other than how I can answer that.
Sure.
I can't really speak on how the other veterans feel.
Right. Yeah, sure. During all this time, it was obviously the Reagan era during the 80s. How did you feel being a veteran that Reagan handled the armed forces from what you could see?
I was very proud. I was very proud of how he handled it. He made America, the American people, feel that the soldier and the military person were a major factor of our country. And through the efforts and the stuff that they gave up, family, lives, brothers and sisters, was important, where I don't see that with this regime.
Now, right after that, when George Bush Sr. took over, how did you feel in him and Desert Storm and how he handled it?
I was glad to see somebody grow some gonads, I guess. Granted, maybe after we got over there, and again, our military told some odd truths about the area, but they went over there with Schwarzkopf and all them. They went over there to kick ass and take names. We're going to go over there and see if there's any weapons of mass destruction, and don't stop us, and if you do, you're dead. Now, did Schwarzkopf want to go up into
Iraq.
Well,
Baghdad.
Baghdad. Yeah, he wanted to go there, but the Bush regime said, look, we've accomplished our mission. Turn around and come back. Now, if they let him go, probably wouldn't have had the other conflict.
Right. Obviously, it probably made you feel proud again to see veterans of the Vietnam War, like Schwarzkopf and Colin Powell, how they handled it too, didn't you?
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Yeah. It made you feel proud to be a military individual, to take part of being your country of what it is.
Do you feel that Reagan and Bush, as commander-in-chiefs, was healing part of the Vietnam process that the military had during that time? For what they did?
Well, I guess the healing factor has probably come and gone. I mean, you're always all your life going to be trying to heal your own inner problem. I think what those two presidents did made us be proud to be a military person.
Sure.
And boost what America is about.
I know one thing they did, especially Bush Sr. did, activating a lot of National Guard units.
Correct.
Which I think, personally, being a National Guard member, former veteran of that, it should have done that in Vietnam, but that's, of course, neither here nor gone, of course. But personally, I think you were probably glad to see that too.
I was glad to see them, you know, people were jumping into the ranks of the National Guard to get out of active duty.
Right, yeah,
you know?
Sure.
But on the same note, now, and I'm not taking, I want you to misconstrue what I'm telling you here.
Sure.
The National Guard fought a different kind of conflict than we did. If they would have used the National Guard in our era, going into the jungle and that, I think they'd have got their ass waxed.
Yep.
But the kind of war with the technology we have today, they didn't have to put them out in total harm's way, you know, in front of a mass, because these guys were hit and run, and they'd go in and take care of a room by room little building or town, and the IEDs they had to deal with. You know, I'm not taking nothing away from that era, because it was just as dangerous as our guys. Right. You know, more so probably because of the bombs, you know, the IEDs, you know, and devastating people's lives the rest of their lives. Sure. And of course we had you know, bombs and bouncing betties and all that, but nothing on like they had it. Ours was mostly ambushes, run and hide in the ground, where we had to go into the element itself tremendously. Right. And where their danger was driving to the element and getting hit with the bombs. You know. Sure. All right. Now, this might be a difficult question for you. You can answer it truthfully. Try not to say too much language about this. When Bill Clinton was elected, how did you personally feel without saying too many bad things? I'll try to be as friendly as I can. Sure, yeah. I was not a friend of or supporter of Clinton. I didn't feel that he worked our country for us. He worked it for politic reasons and him. And without being too erratic, I guess you might say, that's about as much as I can say it. That's perfectly fine. All right, George W. Bush with the Iraq and Afghanistan. First of all, before that, George W. Bush took office. When 9/11 happened, where were you and how did you feel? I was still working in the prison system. I had 32 years working in the prison system, and I was escorting prisoners to court when that went down. And it was very, very a confusing day, because they were, you know, we were, first of all, you hear about one plane hitting the tower and you don't know if it was an accident, and then all of a sudden the second plane hits it, and now they got planes missing in the air. Now you realize you're under attack, is there going to be any nuclear stuff involved with this? And here I'm at work, running around with prisoners. Sure. I felt like I was handcuffed, you know, but I was very concerned, and with what we knew at the time and how Bush handled it, I was proud to be an American. When you heard the Pentagon was hit, did you think in your mind's eye that that would ever be a military spot ever hit at all? No, never. I'd have thought the White House or the Capitol building before the Pentagon, but they knew what they were trying to do. They were trying to get our military, because that's where our military decisions are made and everything. I can understand them trying to hit that. Things were falling together, pieces were coming together, you know, and, and you knew we were in serious trouble when that happened. And had it happened under this regime, nothing would have happened. In my mind. Right, I can't comment on that right now, because he is still technically my commander-in-chief. I'm in the Air Force Inactive Reserve, so we'll leave it at that. All right. Okay, you were very happy how George W. handled that, 9/11, the Pentagon. Now, let's get to why it motivated you to build the World War I monument, the World War II wall, the Korean monument, and then of course all your Vietnam monuments. And just explain that. Okay, I'll try to make it quick for you. Sure, actually I got 4 minutes left, so go ahead. Boy. When I got out of the service, my uncle, my favorite uncle, was a past commander of the VFW post, and he wanted me to join the VFW, so I joined the VFW, and I kind of used the VFW as my medicine, even though there were only 31 members at the time, and I was the first Vietnam veteran to join that post. I got our other VFW members to join, and so that's how I got into building the Veterans Park. This wall here stood in building from 42 to 48, and it was tore down. We got it reconstructed. The city wanted...
Okay, wait a minute. Why don't we stop right there, Denny, and we'll hook up extension cord. This is Steve Hammond again, representing the Grand Valley Veterans History Project, and we're back here with Mr. Denny Craycraft again, and he's going to explain to us the memorials down here, in which order they came in, why he went about doing this, and everything else. You ready, Denny?
I'm ready.
Go ahead.
Back in my early years, I've got 50 years in the VFW and Belding, and I've been commander like 15 different times at that VFW, and many state and national offices that I've held. And one of my World War II veterans at the VFW down there gave me a picture of this wall that's behind me that stood from 1942 to 1948, right about 2 blocks from us right here on this corner. And the Blue Star Mothers, every time somebody from our surrounding area went into World War II, their name went up on the wall. And like I said, that stood from 1942 to 48. There used to be a center point in town where everybody would gather, see whose names were up next. And if you notice on some of the stars on the wall are gold. The gold star represents veterans that were killed in action in World War II. So that being said, I had it on my desk for about 2 years, and I thought maybe I better get off my duff and try to get this thing looked into. I spent another year and a half in the library going through the microfiche of Belding's history from 42 to 48, and I got all the names of the people that were on this wall originally. In 1948, the war being over, since 1945, the guys were coming home, didn't have a job. Gibson's used to be across the street from us here, and the Gibsons asked the city to donate the property to them so they can expand their factory over there to put the guys to work. So they gave them the property and they took the wall down. After the wall was down, it was over the many years, it was sort of just lost. Nobody knew where it was at. So I took on the chore of reconstructing this wall, and not knowing that kind of a project, what it would cost or anything, we got it together, and I was figuring what's it going to take to get this wall built. And I figured around $9,000. Well, $140,000 later, with the cement pad and what you see here, and what we had to go through to get this constructed is what we got invested in. So as we're building the wall, the World War II veterans that were still alive, they were like a parade down this road down here, honking their horn, thumbs up, because they all remember this wall, and it meant a lot to them. In 1948, on Veterans Day, November 11th, they had the closing ceremony of this wall, and they closed it with a black curtain. When we reconstructed this wall 3 years ago, I've been working on this project for the last 8 years. 3 years ago, when we got this dedicated, we had a black curtain on it, and I had 9 of the original veterans that closed the curtain, opened it back up to this one. It was just a fantastic program, and got some good coverage on it and everything. Well, the community came to me in force and said, well, what about our other veterans, our World War I, our Korean, our MIPOWs? And I said, my gosh, you know, I said, this is a project that I'm not used to doing that big, but with the outpour of the businesses and the people in the community, we got this done, and they stood behind me all the way. So this being said, this wall being completed, and this being on historical property, I had to go through much more hoops than just having a piece of property given to us. This is a Veterans Park of Belding. This ain't mine. Everybody seems to think it's mine, but it's not. It's the community's. So at that point, then we went over to the Korean monument and figured out what it was going to cost.
Go ahead and walk over there.
To have this done. And Patton Monument out of Comstock Park has been working together with me and us on this program. So we had this monument set up, and the surrounding area, we didn't lose any Korean veterans. But Ionia County lost, I got this gentleman's name, Clayton D. Adams, U.S. Army. He was the first Korean veteran in Ionia County, which this is our county. So we put his name on the bottom in honor of him, but in honor of all the other veterans, where they could buy bricks, put it down here to honor any Korean veteran. And this is an ongoing thing even today, even with the World War II veterans. We're putting it here in front of the wall. So that was the second project that was done and completed and paid for through donations. And then this one over here.
Give me a second here to.
This is our MIA POW, and this was necessary to put up because I didn't want all the veterans to think that we were just looking at the World War II veterans and the Korean. This is all branches. This honors all branches of the service. We'll let them know that the American Legion, the VFW in our local area here, that we are honoring all of our MIA POWs. This pad in front here are sponsors of businesses and individuals that donate $500 or more. So that helped us get this paid for. After that was over, we went over to the World War I. For a second.
Go ahead.
And of course, the World War I, everybody's gone. Even most of the families are gone. So I spent 2 months going around in our surrounding cemeteries, and I picked up all the World War I's veterans' names, of 360 names right here. So we went and had another project and had the bricks made with all their names on it and got them placed down here. Come up with a design on the World War I veteran monument with the World War I soldier and his garb at the time put on. Also, there's a gentleman right beside it, which is a World War I veteran. His father at the time was the mayor of our town, Hugo Fales, which our American Legion is named after him. Interesting story with this gentleman right here, because he went over and joined the French Foreign Legion and paid for his own way over there to get involved with World War I. And when the United States stepped into World War I, they picked up his unit that he was in. Well, he stayed with his unit over there while the other veterans went on with the Americans. He stayed there and got killed with a bomb that went off. So he never made it. He never made it home. But I mean, a lot of history there. His dad was the mayor of Belding. Our American Legion is named after him. So we thought it would be appropriate to have him alongside of this, because he's a major part of our history in our community. From there, we're going over to the Vietnam Wall. This has been a very heavy roller coaster for me. We've got this sidewalk, and this monument sits way in the back there, and it's going to have 2,654 names.
Go ahead and grab that.
Want to get that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
He's grabbing the cord. Quite an interesting story that Mr. Craycraft has here in Belding, Michigan. Suggest anybody coming through the area, or even just out of the area, to come just visit this area even now before it's completely done. Are we all set?
All set.
All right. Go ahead, Denny.
Okay. The monument that we're going to be building here is shaped like you see there with the V. It's going to have 2,654 names on that wall, and that's every Vietnam veteran in Michigan that was killed in Vietnam will be on this wall.
And how many is that?
2,654. The monument that you see in front of that, this is a mock-up of the next part of the phase of this Vietnam wall. This will be a 7-foot tall monument in black granite with the map of Vietnam lasered into it. And the reasoning behind this is the guys can come in and say, well, I was here, or I was here, or I was here. I want our surrounding Vietnam veterans to show their family what part of the country that they spent their time in Vietnam with. We're going to be honoring this wall. Of course, I got to raise $165,000 just for this monument. And I got about another 95 to go. We've got money raised, and we're doing this in stages.
Now, does this then include the wall with the names on it and this map wall right here?
Yes, this is combined.
Combined, okay.
Now, what you see down here is our Michigan POWs. Now, there's more POWs in Michigan than this, but these are the ones that never made it home. And the back section, as you can see of this monument back here, is our 3 soldiers that we have in bronze. You're on the...
Go ahead.
The bronze soldiers of that stand by the Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C. This was scheduled to be in there just about where that reef is at, but we did not want to block that, that monument there. So we're putting this one here, and this will be dedicated at 5 o'clock Friday on Labor Day weekend. We had to order the black granite from India. It is in, and they're going to be lasering it within the next week. And then we'll have the dedication on Labor Day right here with this. Now, if you look around, you'll see these squares down on the ground. We lost 5 guys in Belding. Greenville lost 7. We're going to have 40-inch pillars tall, and they're foot by foot with a slant on it. Their face will be lasered onto each pillar, and their story will go down the front of the pillar. And this is going to be the walkway of honor when we get those pillars in. The next phase will be the granite going on the wall with all the names on it. My tentative goal is to have that done by Memorial Day 2017, unless my money fairy taps me on the shoulder and says, get it done now. Always looking for that guy. Down in the middle, you can see where the dirt is at. We're working on the wall right now. We're putting a box all the way around, which the lights will be coming up through and going on the wall, and it'll be white stone in there, so in case anybody wants to lay a token of appreciation in front of their name, they can do that. And then that'll be all bricks, just like in the other areas over here with Vietnam veterans. People can buy a brick for $50. We kept the price down real low so everybody could be part of this, so they could put their name in. Any Vietnam veterans will go in that area there. We have a long ways to go. We went through a tremendous amount of hoops. We've made progress, and I'm trying to show the community the progress is still in progress. You can follow us on www.beldingveteranspark.com. on the internet and follow our progress, how we're going through, and donations. But whatever.
Denny, what about the back of the monument here?
The back of the monument will be black granite, and there will be a mural all the way around the back of that of scenes in Vietnam. If you want to stop that for a minute, I got a picture of it.
Sure. Wait a minute. The three women's nurses statue at D.C., is that going to be on the back too? Or?
It's in the plans, yes.
Okay.
Okay, as well as our service dogs.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't decided whether I want to put a model statue, a little statue of a service dog up in front. Again, money is the factor of everything we do.
Sure.
This will be as a statewide monument. This is not a local Belding monument, because we're paying tribute to all the veterans in the state of Michigan on this. And not to take away from any of the other ones, but you know, I have a lot invested in myself.
Well, for obvious reasons, yeah.
And this has been my medication on how I deal with all my issues coming home from Vietnam. And this sort of closes a big chapter on my life.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. We'll hold off on the pictures for now, but I want to end this interview right now by, you have anything else to add of your service, your time in your life that you'd like to just say briefly?
I'd just like to say that, you know, I'm very proud to be from Belding. I'm very proud of the people that I've met in this progress and where we're going with it, and my family putting up with me.
Well, Denny, on behalf of the Veterans History Project, I thank you very much to take the time for letting me interview you. And also I'd like to say personally, I thank you very much, not just for your service in the military, but especially your service in Vietnam, a very hard war to deal with, and the public coming back. I feel that you handled it very well, fantastically, and I'm very proud of you and all the other veterans I know. I unfortunately lost a neighbor of mine over in Nam. He's from Jackson area. And it's going to be really, really fantastic and emotional when you get all this done. And also, too, thank you for supporting veterans like myself later on, because you guys did pave the way for us how we get treated now. We get treated like gold thanks to you Vietnam vets, setting things right for us.
Thank you, Steve.
Back to where we were in World War I, World War II, and even Korea. So one more thing that I'd like to add to, gee, I can't think right now. What an interviewer I am. Well, basically, I know this country and the state, and especially this community, is proud of what you're doing. They really are, and it's going to be really, really nice. And I'm going to promote this in Grand Rapids and other veterans too that come see this, even now, to come see it too. Trying to think one lasting thought here that I want to conclude this interview with is that hopefully generations from now, that we as Americans and people of the world will be able to understand how things happened as far as putting these memorials up. And I just thought of what I wanted to ask you. When they found some Vietnamese people that come over this country find out that I was in the military, right away they apologized to me, and I'm not a veteran. Have you ever had that, apologizing for the war itself over there from Vietnamese people?
Not apologize. I've talked to several of them, and they've thanked me for my service over there. And I think the ones I were talking to weren't even born yet when I was over there.
Right, yeah.
But they're living in a country now. They could see what our efforts were for on an individual basis. You know, our military people over there, not so much our government.
Sure.
But they're happy to be here. I have no ill feelings whatsoever. That's a chapter in my history in my life that I would just soon forget about, and just go forward and show appreciation to all of our veterans that aren't here today, and the ones that are here, that they are appreciated for what they did.
I noticed in the VFW magazine I get some veterans are going back to those areas in Vietnam. If that was ever approached to you, would you even consider it?
I try every year. The VFW has got a Purple Heart program going on. Anybody can apply for. They do so many veterans that had been wounded over there, take them over there for I think a week or 4 or 5 days, and you can see what it is today. You know, maybe 10 years ago I would say no, but today I've crossed so many bridges that, yeah, I'd like to go over and see just how well they're doing today, even though we're not there to help them.
Right.
Because I'm sure a lot of things have changed.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I'd love to have that opportunity.
Well, maybe someday you will, Denny.
Yeah.
First things first, you got to get this monument taken care of.
That's correct. That is correct.
Again, thank you very much, and thank you very much for your service in Vietnam.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
You betcha.